Progress in the FA Cup marks 100 wins for Nigel Clough in all competitions as Stags boss, just as he celebrates an anniversary too. We will never forget the 6th of November 2020 when it was officially announced that Nigel Clough was appointed as Mansfield Town manager. 4 years on, well, we've made some quintessential progress. See what I did there? Tonight, we'll be recapping on 4 fantastic years for Clough in the Stags dugout, plus looking back at Sunday's FA Cup first round tie at Curzon-Ashton, and we'll look ahead to Wrexham and the rest of the games this month as well, and anything else Mansfield Town related. So come and have your say on your team in the comments on the live feed now on the show for the fans, by the fans. Why? Because Mansfield always matters. Sit back, relax, and get involved. This is the Mansfield Matters Podcast. Hello, good evening, and welcome to the Mansfield Matters Podcast. Hope that you're all doing well on this Wednesday night. I nearly said Tuesday night then. So used to it being a Tuesday or a Thursday, but here we are on a Wednesday talking all things Mansfield Town. And I've got a trio of Stags fans, Stags fanatics, who are joining me to talk all things Mansfield Town tonight. So let's say hello, good evening, and welcome to them as we go round the screen and say hello to the man with more shirts than the club's kit man. It's Nick of Mansfield Town Shirts Fame. Evening. Have I unmuted you? No, you've muted yourself.
I've muted myself. What man is that? Hi, Craig. Hello, everyone.
The man, the myth, the legend, that is Alan Wilson. Evening, Al.
Evening, Craig. Evening, Ronnie.
And the man who is going to ditch his Stag season ticket for a season ticket at Curzon-Ashton is Clive Parkin.
Good evening, Craig. Hello, everybody.
Good to see you all as always, and thanks for joining us tonight. As always, if you've got anything Mansfield Town related to say, then get involved in the live feed comments and have your say on your team. Clive, let's start with you, and let's start by looking at your podcast chosen name tonight for the audio listeners. Every week on our live video stream, we all have our names. Usually we just stick with Craig, MMHQ, Nick, Mansfield Town Shirts, Alan Wilson, but Clive often likes to change his up. And this week, well, just you tell the listeners what you've gone for, Clive.
I put on mine. My second team is Curzon and Ashton. That's not an insult to anybody. I was so I felt so happy in their ground on Sunday. It was a lovely little environment. We parked within feet of the ground, free of charge. The food was fine. The atmosphere was lovely. People were very friendly. I've adopted them as my non-league team of the year.
Non-league team of the year. So you're going to change it up again next year, but we'll see what happens.
I hope they get promoted.
Well, I think they will. I think they're a good side, and it was an interesting game. Nick, you were there alongside us. You were the one who managed to secure. I think Clive was impressed with prime car parking. Elite. Who are you with? These lot was the cry, and it was a good game, and they're a good outfit, aren't they? It was a nice little setup at Curzon Ashton. I hope it's a relationship which continues.
Yeah, I'd like to nominate that for car parking spot of the year at the annual awards dinner, if possible. But yeah, no, it was a great game. Made slightly more comfortable by the early decision, obviously, that went in our favour. But yeah, it was a great. It seems like a while since we've been to a sort of lower non-league team. I don't even know if we've played one under Clough. Certainly not away from home that I can think of.
No, I was struggling.
It was
great.
great. Yeah, we enjoyed. Obviously, the three of us and my dad went. Yeah, it was a really nice day. I think all the Stag fans there enjoyed it. And despite the scoreline, I think their club will enjoy the extra money, hopefully, that it brings for them.
Yeah, absolutely. It's what the FA Cup's all about, Alan. But ultimately on the day, a 4-0 win. Yes, it was against 10 men, and we played against 10 men for the majority of the game. Some debate over the penalty decision, but by the letter of the law, it was deliberate handball on the line, so he had to go.
Yeah, well, basically, I think he tried to put it in his pocket, didn't he? It was definitely a penalty. No question about that from what I saw anyway. But yeah, thoroughly professional performance, which is what was needed. And it was nice to see young Uncle Stephen's nephew get on the score sheet, as well as Uncle Stephen as well.
Yeah, it was certainly a good day for the Quinns, Clive.
Yeah, it was. It was nice to see Ben out on the field anyway. But he took a goal, and that's always nice. But just going back to the sending off, I thought it was a bit of a shame the lad got sent off, but that's the rules. They've got to work to them. If the referee's awarding a penalty in that situation, he doesn't have any real choice. I don't think it improved the game. Having said that, we managed quite well against. You see, what happens when you go down a player early doors, and all that happens is you put 10 players behind the ball to try and limit the game. And I think that was always going to make it much more difficult and quite frustrating for a team that wants to beat them. But the fact we scored 4 against them, 3 of which after the penalty, I think was commendable. And we could have had 2 or 3 more. We hit posts and stuff, and they had players clearing stuff away. So I'm pleased that both Quinns scored. It's the first time it's happened, and it's given you a headline.
Yeah, it certainly has. I mean, I can't tell. I usually come up with the headlines for the show, but Clive has created this week's, and actually it's turned out quite well with the anniversary of Nigel Clough, which, to be honest, I'd forgotten about when we were writing the episode. Otherwise, I might have postponed Quintessential Progress and called it something like Clough Love or something, but I quite like Quintessential Progress as a name. Nick, as a former whistleblower yourself, if you were the man in the middle on Sunday, would you have made the same decision?
I think, to be fair, I think it was a good decision, because when I first saw it, I think a lot of us from our angle thought it had hit his hands as he held them up. But when you see the replay, especially from behind the goal, it clearly hits his arm. I think my favourite bit of punditry was on the BBC, where they all agreed it was a handball. They all agreed it was a penalty. They all agreed that the rule was that he should go. But all of them said, oh, well, it's the FA Cup, and oh, well, we could have kept him on. Could you imagine if it was the other way round?
Oh,
and he didn't give it? Oh, my goodness. Do you think they'd all been saying, oh, it was a shame the Mansfield player got sent? No. So a handball's a handball. Doesn't matter whether it's the first minute, last minute, whether he plays for Real Madrid or whether he plays for Oak Tree Mango. It doesn't really matter, does it? It's a red card. I think fair play to the ref for doing it so early, because you know what they're like sometimes, especially against Mansfield. But he didn't let the occasion get to him and just went, off you go. I don't think they really moaned about it, did they? I
thought he had a good game, to be fair.
Yeah, not if you watch the highlights back. You can see me throwing my arms up at every single decision because we were stood opposite the camera. I think at one point he gives a free kick and I just turn around and my arms are up in the air.
It was a bit random, especially in the first half, wasn't it?
He was a bit eclectic mix of decisions, and I must admit, the Mansfield Matters stand, as we christened it, he did get a bit. He did get a few pelters, to be honest, from close range.
I was giving him lots of encouragement.
You were
You
just
were.
Clive. You were just shouting, "Ref! I found this fantastic invention. It's a car key wash."
Yeah, Clive should probably explain that he did come back to us from a urinatory
Absolutely,
stop.
he should.
And his first words were, bear in mind he hadn't driven, "I've just dropped my car keys down the toilet." That dominated the next at least 2.5 hours of discussion, really.
You can't even ask Clive how that happened.
You know, my
driving,
primary role
that's why I had it
in
out.
the away days with Mansfield Matters colleagues is to be the object of ridicule. I mean,
100%.
I thought after I'd told him, I thought, was that information they needed? And
Yeah.
I did think you provided a little bit too much information because you informed us of the type of toilets that it was.
It
and we didn't need
was a
to
very
mention
new and very clean toilet, I'm pleased to say.
Good job.
Fortunately for you, the car key did work when you get back, so we can praise all of the Curzon Ashton facilities, including the newly invented car key fob wash located under the main seated stand.
And top
We should
marks
thank
to
Mazda as well, shouldn't we?
Marks to Mazda for giving us a watertight key fob.
Absolutely. Well done, Mazda. If you want to chuck a
There you
sponsorship our way, mtfcmatters@gmail.com. Alan, let's go back to the game itself. Obviously, you know, the big talking point was that handball and the penalty decision. We did end up winning 4-0, but did that perhaps ruin the FA Cup tie for Mansfield as much as it did for Curzon Ashton? Because, like we've alluded to, playing against 10 men, especially against a non-league side who, you know, are doing quite well in their division and are wanting to sort of progress themselves, it can make it a little bit more difficult. And at times, even though we had the man extra, it did make it more difficult.
It did it to a certain extent, but I mean, was it the first 2-3 minutes when that lad got throw on goal and Kilgore made that absolutely stupendous tackle? It was unbelievable.
It was
right,
Alan.
you know,
It wasn't unbelievable. It was just a
Oh my God
moment.
Yeah, well, it's Kilgore, isn't it? You know what I mean? But no, I thought it was a thoroughly workmanlike performance. You know, they're professional in everything they did. They passed the ball around nicely. I don't think it would have made a difference it might have been different scoreline. It might not have been quite so many if he hadn't been sent off. But I just thought it was job done and well done to Stags.
And I think it's one of those things, isn't it, Nick, as well, that the FA Cup tie, like we discussed a little bit last week, gave an opportunity for Nigel Clough to have a look at a few things. We'll talk about personnel in a minute, but one thing he did have a look at was a different formation going back to the back four with Alfie Kilgore and Aidan Flint returning or reuniting that centre-back partnership, which started, of course, the start of last season.
Yeah, I think he said he wanted to change the formation a bit, didn't he? Push David to midfield. It was a perfect game to use it, wasn't it? I mean, normally the FA Cup games just seem to get in the way for us. We've normally got injuries or we could just stick into the league or whatever, but it was perfect for us, wasn't it? It was a bit of a break from the league. We'd had a good performance the week before, good result, or 2 good results, and we could play a lot of players who hadn't played. And I think for Clough, for once, he probably appreciated having the FA Cup where he could change things about. I think 5 at the back would have been a little bit too much maybe against a team that low, but I think at the minute in the league, I think the 5 seems to be more solid. It allows us to keep the ball at the back, even if we are a little bit less aggressive going forward with it. But for that game, I think it suited it, didn't it? And we controlled the game really from the back. And I think the fact that they kept lumping it up to the 2 largest centre halves they'll play all season was a bit of a miscalculation on their part, because I don't think Jimmy Spencer had the ball more than 5 seconds at a time before it. Somebody just went through him, or they played it in the air, and Flint was twice the size of anything they had anywhere near there. So I think it worked for that game. It'd be interesting to see what he goes with Wrexham, but I'd expect the 5 to be back, I think.
Well, Flint was magnificent in the air. He has the benefit of altitude. Unfortunately, his feet are such a long way from his brain. Some of his
they were a little bit on Saturday.
It was a bit weird, some of his passing. I'm guessing that's because he's still growing back into the game.
Do you think he did enough, Clive, either of them, Flint or Kilgore, to warrant a starting place at Wrexham on Saturday?
Yeah.
Which one? Both? Or?
Both.
Interesting. And what would you do? Would you stick with the back 4 with them as the 2 centre backs, or would you push Dave back in there and go for a back 3? Which would
I like Dave where he is. I really do. I'm in a bit of a dilemma, really, because yes, I like Dave as a defensive player, but he adds a little bit of something to what would be a fairly exposed midfield without him there. So I don't know. I just think that we're going to have to get them back on the field together. That's part of the great plan of things. The only thing is if they're not quite match fit, but they didn't show any signs of being fatigued on Sunday. And then the question is, who else is waiting to get in the game? You know, Cargill's a credible player. Is he likely to be better than either of those two? I don't know.
Surely, Alan, I think for me, it will depend on what formation he goes with in terms of Flint and Kilgore. Because if you go with a back four, they're both playing centre back and their roles are quite sort of, solid, and it's quite easy to adapt to it. Whereas if we go into a back three with them, one of the two has got to play as a wide centre back. And Alfie Kilgore, I think, can do it. Aidan Flint, on the other hand, I'm not entirely sure he can. As Clive alluded to, Alan, with his comments there, his passing on Sunday was a little bit worrying. And I just worry against Wrexham that might be a little bit too much to ask for him to play on the left-hand side of that three.
I would agree with Nick. I think it will go straight back to the 5. And I think it will a lot of it will depend on how they do this week in training as well, because I can see, although Hewitt, in my opinion, had a decent game, I can see, Akins coming into the equation as well, because whenever you see him there, it's pretty solid. It really is. So it'll be interesting, not only whether Cargill gets in, whether they stay as they are, or, who he chooses. He's got an embarrassment of riches, and it will be very interesting to see come 11:30 or just after on Saturday, who gets the nod.
Yeah, it'll certainly be an interesting one to see how it all pans out. I don't see us going into it a 4. I think that the biggest question, Nick, is where do you place Dave? If you are going to go with Kilgore and Flint in there, someone's got to play left side centre back. Dave could probably do that, but I'd probably be looking at Kilgore. But maybe, like Clive said, he didn't have too much of a bad game in midfield, and that would maybe allow Lewis Reed to be a little bit more creative, a little bit higher up.
I think for me, if you play the 5 and then Dave in midfield, for me that's too defensive. I think you'd end up with 6 defenders. I think at times. I think if you play the back 4. And then you play Reed in front, we can get a bit exposed because Reed tends to float around, and he is by far one of the best players in this league. So, I'm not slagging him off at all. But he tends to float about doing his role. So sometimes we get exposed with a back 4. I think you even saw it on Saturday that at times that even they were in behind at our back 4 quite a lot. But I think if you play a 5, I think Dave just slots back into the defence for me, and then it allows Reed to sit in front of that with a bit more protection, and he can then disappear and go and do his fancy stuff that he does. But if in a back 4, I've got no issue with pushing Dave. But maybe a lack of pace in a back 4 if you keep the 2 that we had on Saturday. But yeah, I think a back 5, if you don't want Flint to have the ball so much, you're probably going to have to put him in the middle and then have 2 quicker players either side, potentially Kilgore and Dave. You've got Bowery as well, remember? Obviously, Bowery tends to play quite a lot. Somehow gave away a penalty from the halfway line last time. So he might want a bit of revenge. But then you got Blake Tracy, I thought had another good game. He can play there with Macca at left back. So we've never had the amount of options in a defence ever. We could play 3 back 4s.
It's insane.
Madness. Yeah,
absolutely insane. Like Mick says in the comments, it's nice to have a choice. Yellows. Ashley says Mansfield have such a strong 11. Who do you pick? Is a good question indeed. And the gate ad's got to say Mullin and Voldemort. I think he's alluding to Mr. Palmer there. Couldn't hit a barn door in the cup. Just makes me wonder if maybe Wrexham's front lads are getting a bit exhausted already. But it's interesting that I went on one of the Wrexham podcasts last night. Got a late call up to that one, and he was saying on there that as much as their goals have fired them up the league, what they're lacking this season is an instinctive striker. So we will see. We'll see what happens, and we'll talk a little bit more about the Wrexham game later on when we do ye old podcast predictions. But let's round off our chat about the FA Cup, Clive, by having a little look at some of the others who stood out for you on Sunday. Then I've obviously mentioned the likes of Flint and Kilgore, who came back in. George Maris had a little bit of a run as well. Lucas Akins played up top as well, little bit of a different partnership. So it really was an opportunity for Nigel Clough to have a look. But who particularly stood out for you?
Well, I think Quinn had a good game. Quinn, the senior, uncle. I thought he performed well. We know what his limitations are in terms of his physicality now. It's inevitable he's not going to be a 90-minute, 100-minute player every game. But I thought he was on the knuckle there. He was doing everything right. And I think he worried them because he got incredible knowledge of the game, which allowed him to do things that lack of speed would normally deter him from. And I think they all had a decent game. I think probably the player that had the least impact on the game was Will Evans. He just didn't seem to. It wasn't his type of game. I think he wasn't getting the sort of service he would be looking for. But he never stopped running. I mean, the lad's a powerhouse. So I'm happy to say that I agree with some of the pundits who've said that Quinn is the man of the match. But I also thought Tracy had a decent game.
Yeah, lots of options for sure. And then, of course, the FA Cup draw on Monday night. Nick drew us against a fellow League One side in Stevenage. A nice little trip to Stevenage on the 30th of November. What did you make of that cup draw? It could have been kinder.
It's just boring, isn't it? That's the one word. It's just boring, isn't it? Like another League One team is like top tier boredom. Then you go, well, away from home's even more boring. Then against a boring team. So they've ticked all the boxes there. Could have been worse. Could have been Birmingham or Bolton or somewhere where we really didn't want to go. We can beat Stevenage. I think.
Nick, two things there. Yeah. It's an opportunity for revenge because they beat us at Algar.
Absolutely.
And actually, we play so much better and much more relaxed away from home than we do at home, in my opinion.
Yeah, I would fancy us more to beat them away than we did at the one call. But yeah, it is what it is. It's winnable, isn't it? I didn't want County or Chesterfield, and I will never understand Stags fans wanting County or Chesterfield in the cup.
Same.
I don't want to play them. Not interested at all. Because if they win, it's like, well, it's not worth it, is it? But yeah, it would have been nice to have got some of the other draws that teams have had, but you can only beat what's in front of you, and we've got just as much chance of beating Stevenage as anybody else.
I think the important thing, Alan, is just getting through. Like Nick says, it's a boring fixture, and sometimes that's all you want. We're better away from home at the minute. There'll be that revenge factor that is certainly on the minds of Nigel Clough and the players following that defeat just a few weeks ago. But win it, and we're in the hat for round 3, and that is where it could really change and really impact on the future if we were to get a nice little home draw against a Premier League side, or even better, I think, in the FA Cup this year, an away tie against a Premier League side. Thinking about the financial impact of that.
Yeah, well, to be fair, I was quite pleased when I saw the draw because with it being Stevenage, obviously I'm going to be busy quite a few Sundays now leading up to Christmas. And I thought if it's like a small team or whatever, it might get put to Sunday and I'm going to be sweating a little bit. So I haven't heard yet, but I assume it will be a Saturday that, the matches, against them. So I can't see it being on telly. So I was quite happy in a way, but all being well, we should get through. Like Nick said, we've got as good a chance as anybody else. So let's have round 3 and a nice draw at home.
You say that, though, but stranger things have happened. I mean, TV selections picked Harrogate and Wrexham in round 1, like that was ever a TV game. So, Stevenage versus Mansfield on ITV on a Sunday.
The problem with that argument, Craig, is that neither us nor Stevenage are Harrogate. And neither us nor Stevenage are Wrexham. So it was the perversity of Wrexham versus Harrogate, which you're right, it's the wrong game to pick, and it was a lousy game to televise anyway. But that's what happens. They've still got that magnetism, haven't they?
Certainly is. Clive, I know you're delighted by the choice of Stevenage. You're itching to get tickets and check out the facilities again, aren't you? You're quite a fan of the surroundings, aren't you?
I think so. I think it's a relatively short journey. It's a very straightforward journey to Stevenage, whichever way you choose to go, coach, train or drive. Parking is normally available in a field directly opposite the ground. Free parking there as well, unless there's a fair on or a circus, which there was last time we went. But adjacent to the ground, you only have to go through about 30 underpasses, but adjacent to the ground is a retail park with Nando's and McDonald's and other mainstream purveyors of junk food.
other providers are available. We'll be looking forward to that. Tickets, I'm sure, will be on sale soon. A little bit of fixture
And we'll
news.
sell out, won't we? That's
Absolutely, yeah, of course we will. And a little bit of fixture news in case you have missed it earlier on before we talk about our next topic, which will take up the majority of the rest of the show. And that is, of course, Leyton Orient away, scheduled for a week. Saturday is naturally off because we've got all these international appearances. Although this time around, Nick, Christy O'Pim didn't get a call up, so I've heard he's been practicing his Canadian.
Yeah, he's been listening to a lot of Shania Twain this week. So yeah, he's I bet he'll be disappointed actually, because I think they told him originally that he was more likely to get a call up in November, which is weird that he's now not been called up. So I know Bailey Peacock due for what sits back, isn't he?
Yeah.
Although he didn't play for
Farrell,
Birmingham against us, Peacock Farrell. So yeah, he'll be disappointed, but he can play for about 30 other nations. So I guess he just draws them out the hat. Goes on the Ancestry website and just digs another one up, starts again.
Just singing to himself in training, man, I feel like a keeper. Right, let's move on and talk all things Nigel Clough.
Oh my God.
Oh my God. Oh my God. Because 4 years ago today, Alan, I don't think it's an understatement to say that it was a day which would go on to change the course of Mansfield's history forever, as Nigel Clough was appointed as Mansfield Town manager.
I was very pleased when I got the appointment because I've read through other things that Nigel's done. He gets things on a sound footing. He doesn't spend his money. He spends his money like he would spend his own, other people's money. I mean, like John and Carolyn's. He spends it like he would spend his own. He's very spendthrift. He's very careful. He was I thought he was a perfect fit, which has proved to be correct because we've gone on leaps and bounds under his tenureship, and long may it continue.
It's certainly the longest tenure I can remember for a Mansfield manager, Nick, in recent years. Paul Cox, I think, was very, very similar. He had a couple of seasons. I think he had three and a bit. So I think Nigel Clough surpasses him now. But take yourself back to 2020 and that horrendous time. Worst Mansfield Town side, I think, probably ever. Hadn't got a win all season under Graham Coughlin. It wasn't going well in the COVID times. And he had a really tough job to do. And that I remember at the time sort of talking amongst us on the podcast. I know you weren't with us at the time, but we were all sort of saying about getting the appointment right. And there were so many good options or so many different options at the time as well. I think the Cowley brothers were available. Lee Johnson was available at the time, all without a club. So there was rich pickings in terms of management, and it was big pressure on John and Carolyn to get it right. And, oh my God, they have.
Yeah, he's the best manager, certainly in my lifetime and this century, without a shadow of a doubt. He's just transformed the club, hasn't he? But by the way of his actions and the person who he is, and people appreciate who he is, and he's been a breath of fresh air, hasn't he? Let's be honest. He's been the most integrated into our little club of ours of any manager I've ever known. It doesn't feel like he's the manager. It feels like he's some sort of custodian where he sort of runs over everything, doesn't he? He's not just the manager of the 11 players and he disappears. He's now synonymous with Mansfield, I think, just as much as anyone else. He's been superb. And what we've done as a club very well is we've just given him time. I think all of us probably thought if you give him 5 years, he'll create something special. And it's took him 3 and a bit to get us promoted. And look where we are now. And from his interview, it doesn't seem like he's got any immediate signs of stopping, which is even better because it sounds like he's going to be here for I think a couple of more years. Certainly listen to that interview. I know Steve-O stuck the 4 years on him and he didn't dismiss it, did he?
No.
He didn't dismiss it outright, which I thought was really strange because I thought he was just going to say, oh, no, not interested in 4 years. But he didn't. So, we could be in another 4 years. And I think League One has given him, and we talked about it in the car, a real sense of freedom now because I think he was concerned that if he couldn't get us up, it would be a failure for him on his record. And now he's succeeded. It's a free hit for Mansfield because we're not a League One club, are we? As much as we'd like to think we are, we're a League Two club, really. We've been there for the last 30 odd years. Well, we've been lower, haven't we? And it's a free hit for him now. And I think he's just loving the fact that there's no pressure, and he can just do what he wants. And I think it suits him this year. It suits him in League One. It really does. Yeah,
it certainly brought a new lease of life to him. We'll talk about his future in our future later on in the show. But Clive, I want to come to this comment from the Gate and about Nigel. And I think the Gate is spot on here, who says, his sense of humility is grand. It's not about him. It's about the lads, the fans, the backroom staff, everyone. He's just instilled this culture, which I don't think. I mean, thinking back over the amount of managers that I've seen, I've never felt a culture like this from a fan perspective. I've been lucky enough to spend, 3/4 of a season in a journalistic position to get a little bit of a closer look to it. And I'd I'd shoot anyone that gave me the opportunity. If someone said you've got to kill 4 people, I'd kill 4 people to have that insight now, because it's gone on and on and on. And I think what he's done, Clive, like the comment says, is made this club more community sense, quite humble, quite focused as well. Whereas previous managers have just made it an absolute circus.
Yeah, the thing is, he's had as Nick says, he's been given the time to develop stuff, and it's not just the recruitment. Although that's a vital part of it. It's not just knowing which players to pick. That's a vital part of it. It's not just knowing what strategy to play with. That's another vital part. It's a culmination of all sorts of stuff. And it started at a very difficult time because we were very low in the league. We hadn't got a win under our belt in the league. Then we got COVID in front of us, so I was playing in front of empty stadia. It couldn't have had a worse time to try and pick the club up. And I think, as he said in his interview, although I've not seen it all, one of his first tasks was to get the team to be a bit more attractive to potential new recruits. Because very difficult to recruit players when they can see a team that's struggling to survive at the bottom of League Two. So as soon as we started to develop and move forward, he was able therefore to attract different standard of player. And of course, he's got a contact book to envy, really, with all his years in the game. Albeit there's a whole 3/4 of it devoted to Burton Albion. But he has been able to lure players because of who he is and his reputation that other managers wouldn't get. And I think that's it. And the fact that we're now on an upward trajectory makes his life so much more pleasant. I think if we'd have had 2 really awful years scrapping around and the fans not being as comfortable as they obviously are at the moment, he would be getting a lot of stick. And I think under those circumstances, we may have seen a slightly different club. But I'm glad we haven't, because he performs well when he's at his most comfortable. And quite clear that at the moment he has a set of circumstances which he's very comfortable with. This is the first time since he's been with us he hasn't got rooms full of nearly dead players. We've only got one on the injury list at the moment. That's luxury for the lad, isn't it?
I certainly look forward to seeing how he handles that, because I think what he's done, Alan, he's done quite well in terms of thriving when the chips are down and having to be really up against it. But he's put us on this footing. He's got everybody available to him now, and I think like we've sort of alluded to, perhaps our future. We have got a free hit essentially this season, and to make us even more of an attractive proposition than what we were 4 years ago. Because if I was a player 4 years ago, I wouldn't have fancied Mansfield Town as a side that in 4 years' time would be, in League One and competing well.
It's like Clive says, though, his name goes before him, doesn't it? Like his dad did before him. And it's just a big thing in football, that is. And he's also very, very approachable. He's a really nice guy. He's a down-to-earth guy. You can talk to him. He'll always have to spend the time of day with you if you ask him a question or whatever. And the other thing, you can say about him is about all the positions that the players that he knows well, your Aikins, your Barry, and everybody else who he puts in different positions, have worked when they've needed. They've needed to work because of the injuries. And, that's all down, at the end of the day, that's down to Nigel. Not everybody agrees with the 11 he puts out, but they always seem to do the job. And it's very rare that he's wrong.
I think one thing we do need to do, Nick, is give praise to John and Carolyn and the board of directors as well. Obviously, David Sharp played a huge role in bringing him to the club at the time as well, when we had someone someone actually based in the UK on the ground in a really difficult time. We can talk more about that later on, but it's this comment from Jack, which I think we should touch upon a little bit, which says there was arguably more pressure on John and Carolyn by not sacking him with the 2 winless runs of around 10 games, albeit mainly due to injuries. How many managers go that amount of games without a win and keep their job?
I think they've obviously this time thought we've appointed somebody who knows a lot more about football than we do, and arguably knows more than anyone at the club. You know, it's that sort of Arsene Wenger at Arsenal sort of thing, or Fergie at United, isn't it? Where they're that figure who, in Football Matters, Clough is sort of not his own boss. That's not quite right, but I think the only man who would let Clough go is himself. I think he's got that position where he's just. You knew he would get it right, and I think us as fans knew that. And it's obviously harder for owners to know that because it's their money at the end of the day. But I think they knew Clough would get it right with the right amount of resource and the right amount of time. And as Jack said, we did have some horrific runs at times, but they obviously saw the bigger picture and realised why they'd brought him in the first place. And his resume and looks at Burton, we got them to the Championship. It was all there, wasn't it? You could see exactly how he works given the time. So they obviously thought, and not a lot of owners do, that if you give him the time, he'll do it. And he's proved them absolutely right. But we should definitely thank John and Carolyn for that, because some owners would have bit the bullet and just got rid. But they've obviously got a vision, haven't they?
I think the vision from them as well, Clive, is the key thing to talk about, because when you are in the situation which Mansfield were then, it's difficult to think about now because we're in such a better place as a club. But at the time, you know, we as a country had no idea when football fans would be allowed and permitted back into stadia. So that revenue of income was dead in the water. You had to go through so many different restrictions, and it made player recruitment difficult because, you know, hotels you couldn't stay in it as much. There were travel restrictions, COVID restrictions, all of that, which is such a difficult time. And what you need to do is get the infrastructure right in terms of the club top to bottom. We'll come on to transfers and things like that later on. But what I mean by that is if we'd have appointed the Cowley brothers or Lee Johnson, who were obviously the main names that were sort of touted at the time other than Clough, both of those managerial teams have obviously got excellent success on the pitch in terms of delivering results. But what they lacked was the nous and the knowledge to build a club up from the bottom. And that a key part of that is the whole transfer thing and ripping up the budget and getting players playing and making it, cultivating it into a good atmosphere. So the need to get the appointment right in terms of somebody with structural knowledge probably outweighed the need at the time for someone with a little bit of a footballing nous, because any manager, I think, could have come in at the time and kept us up, which was all that we probably asked for as fans at the time.
Yes.
Good answer.
I think we're all singing off the same song sheet here. For all the things they didn't get right, the one thing they have got right is disappointment of Clough. It wasn't an easy appointment because he doesn't come cheap. And him and his team aren't the cheapest option out there, I'm sure. And then, of course, you've got the double whammy of a team which is struggling to survive, a stadium which is only a third full, and then COVID comes along. And so surviving COVID was essential, and the owners were able to bankroll the club during that time. Coming out of COVID, the fans all of a sudden were hungry for football again. I mean, watching football live, and all of a sudden our gates picked up, and then our performances picked up, and now instead of having average gates around the 3,000 mark, we've got average home attendance as well in excess of 6,000. In fact, we've got over 6,000 season ticket holders this season. So the whole thing has picked up momentum, and the only limitation going forward is whether, in fact, we can accommodate a few more people in the ground, because all of the extra costs of running the football club successfully cannot continue to be borne out of the pockets of the owners. At the moment, the extra fans are paying for a lot of it, which is good. There's also a lot of other infrastructural costs that have to be found at this moment in time as well. So by restricting the number of fans we can have, if we have a decent season this year, because you can bet the season ticket demand will be up again next year. That's the real test now, is how do we manage to take this momentum and carry it forward? Because it would be dead easy now to say, well, we're a third division. We're a League Two side that's got into League One, but we're not accepted as League One standard because of where we've come from and how long it's taken us to get there. But that's where we are. We will survive this year. We may even do better than survive this year. But the reality is our infrastructure needs to now catch up. And that means giving the announcer a better PA system. It means having more seats for people to sit on or more safe standing if that's the option. And we're working towards that. At the moment, every now and again, we can't sell tickets to our own fans because we haven't got seats for them. That's the biggest problem I've got. And if I was Clough, I'd be pushing for some fairly quick expansion of the ground situation. Now, we're working on Bishop Street. That's a project. But I think it was not that long ago that Sid said something like, the easiest way of putting more seats in this ground is through the corners.
Yeah.
Well, that was a refreshing piece of honesty, wasn't it? And I really hope we take that to heart, because that's we've been sitting. I'm not going to make this any longer than it needs to be, but we've spent such a long time playing against crappy little teams in crappy little grounds that ours was quite a good one by comparison. It's completely different now. We're one of the worst grounds at the level we're playing at.
Yeah, it certainly is a thing about infrastructure. And on that point, Nick, this is where last week on the podcast, I had a little bit of a rant because there was a certain comment which was saying about throwing money at the playing squad in January. It's evident we don't need to do that. But like Clive's just alluded to there, what we do need to do is make improvements, because where we are at now is at maximum capacity in terms of the income we can generate on a match day, which will generate future income for future players and future progression on the pitch. And I think that's where Nigel Clough has come into his own, because he's recognised that we don't need to go out and put big numbers on checks in terms of signing players. We can get quality and quantity in for good money, and if it doesn't become if those players aren't available immediately, then what they are is patient, and we can look through some of the transfers in a minute. But do you see what my point in what I'm making compared to last week, where people, Nick, were going, spend money in the January transfer window and push for back-to-back promotions? Well, if we did that, we're only going to have the same amount of season tickets next year. We're going to same amount of away fans. We need to now invest off the pitch, but maintain on the pitch. And I don't think there's any other manager, any better management team out there to do that than Nigel Clough.
Yeah, I think the last thing we need to spend money on is the playing staff for once. I think the problem is when you splash money, you get what Birmingham have got, which is players who are there for one reason, and that is the monthly pay packet. There's not one player at the Stags who's there for money at all. We spoke about this, didn't we, a few weeks ago? And Clough doesn't need a big budget to do that. And I think you're quite right. I think Ben's alluded to it in his last comment as well, that the infrastructure is what needs improving, isn't it? Let's get a better club shop. Let's get better facilities for kids on a match day. I've only really started noticing now, but there's way more you could do with that. There's maybe a lot of room we could fill for more fans in the corners and what they're doing with the Bishop Street. But yeah, we don't need to throw money at it. That's not what Clough's done so far. So why do we all of a sudden think that would work? I think it's just give Clough the money he needs, but he doesn't need a lot, does he? He doesn't ask for a lot, and if he does ask for a lot for a player, and all of a sudden he wants 200 grand for a Will Evans, look what's happened. When Clough does spend money, he gets it right.
Yeah.
So I think you're completely right. Spend the money on the infrastructure and the playing squad. Clough will tell you when he needs more money. I think it's simple as that. He will tell you when he wants more money for what he needs, and the rest of it should go on the infrastructure for the longevity of the club, to help us in the future and be more sustainable.
Yeah, and that's what it's all about. It's about building for the future, and we have come a long, long way indeed. Let's again, Clive, cast our minds back though to 2020, November 2020. We were at a loss, and as a squad, I'm just looking through some of the sides here. In fact, I've got Nigel Clough's first two lineups for the first game he managed Scunthorpe away in the EFL Trophy, a 2-1 win. And then, of course, the first league win at Forest Green a few days later. He used pretty much every player available to him in the squad so he could have a good look over everybody. And very few have remained, which says it all. And you also look at some of the names in there and you think about how much money they were on, which is almost bad management and bad recruitment by the previous team. So it wasn't just the on-field play that Nigel Clough had to get right. It was the balance within the squad as well, in terms of the amount of money they were being paid, the attitude and application they were putting into it as well, because Nigel Clough likes a certain type of player. And if you've got an attitude and you aren't willing to fight and work for the shirt, well, you won't be around for much longer.
Yeah. And first of all, can I apologise for disappearing a moment ago? Somebody at the door. It's trick-or-treaters at the door.
He dropped his car key down the toilet.
It weren't Jim, was it? A week late.
No, but anyway, so they're running a bit late, the trick-or-treat. No, you're right, though. I mean, what Clough inherited was players he hadn't purchased, he hadn't selected. And he would have very quickly recognised those that fit his mould and those that didn't. And I don't think it's all about money, because I think he's not been frightened to pay people decent money, and we know that Pim's on a decent salary, etc. But I think he wanted players who were going to do what he wanted his players to do, and not all of them were able to do that or willing to do that. And we had a few players who were just freeloading, no question about that. And then you've got chemistry. There are going to be some players that will work well for a Clough and others that won't. And as soon as you know they're not going to work well for him, you've got to shift them out. But it's taken 3 years. It's taken 6 windows to get the squad where he wants it to be.
8.
Is it 8?
8 windows, yeah.
Yeah. Well, he did. I mean, there was some panicky stuff happening as well, don't forget. Can you remember a chap called Narty?
Yes, I remember him. Remember him very well indeed.
And the chap from Stoke who played one game. What was his name?
He was from Stoke that played one
Forrester,
game.
Was it?
That's a bit.
Forrester.
Will Forrester.
Yeah.
Yeah, these were players we've tried to get because we were under pressure to get players in. And I think that proves the point as well, that actually take your time. Wait for players that you really want, which he's done on a number of occasions now.
Nick's frantically searching for shirts.
Look at that. I liked him, by the way. I thought he was a decent player.
Well,
he was never really our play, though, was he? He was only on loan.
No, Sturck was on loan, wasn't he?
Sturck and Burke.
Yeah. What a season. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. We're going to delve into some of the transfer dealings and look at how Nigel Clough has shaped us into what we are now. But first, we are going to take a quick break. As always, if you want to have your say on your team, please do get involved. And what I want to know from you guys at home and you guys on the panel as well is, other than promotion, because that is the obvious answer, what has been your best Nigel Clough moment so far? What's the one thing or the thing or whatever that he's done most for the club to turn it into what we are now? Let us know what that is, but it cannot be promotion. It's got to be anything other than promotion. We'll talk all about that after we come back after these. You're back with the show for the fans, by the fans. This is the Mansfield Matters Podcast. Thanks for joining us tonight as we celebrate the anniversary of Nigel Clough and his appointment as Mansfield Town Manager on this day in 2020, 4 years later. And oh my God, are we in a much better place than what we were. Joining me to talk all things Clough and all things progression, Nick of Mansfield Town Shirts fame, Clive Parkin and Alan Wilson are with us tonight. And we want to know what your favourite memories are or what your favourite moments are so far of Nigel Clough. Excluding promotion. You can't pick promotion. We'll come to a few of them later on. But first, though, Nick, I want to delve into the transfer windows. As we mentioned before, he's had 8 windows at the helm now, and it's certainly taken its toll, and it's time to get to where it is. But before we do that, one of the key things that Nigel Clough has done, Nick, is put in place an infrastructure for recruitment. There's a brilliant blog post out there written by Andy Burgess, our former head of recruitment and former midfielder from the conference days, who in 2019, transfer deadline day, was our head of recruitment. And he wrote a quite eye-opening post. You can find it if you search for it on Stagsnet and a few other places about the transfer dealings, and there being, according to Andy Burgess anyway, no directors on the ground in the UK to make decisions and to bridge that gap. and having to run everything through the chairman and CEO, John and Caroline, who, of course, were out in Portugal, which made it almost impossible to sign players. A deal for Roland Menezes fell through on that day. George Maris fell through on that day as well, and there was some movement elsewhere which also fell through. Go and have a read at that. But flash forward, to a year later with Nigel Clough at the helm. Simon Clough, his brother, is head of recruitment. He's got a good scouting team around him as well. Weirdly, the assistant manager, Gary Crosby, doesn't stand alongside him in the dugout. It's Mr.
Oh my God.
In Andy Garner, and Crosby goes and does a lot of the scouting. And what we've done, Nick, is put a really solid foundation in place for that recruitment.
Yeah, I trust that Clough's got a network, hasn't he, of people that he trusts implicitly to do their job correctly. And it's sort of, I don't imagine that he comes to John and Caroline at the last minute with a panic and goes, oh, God, we need to sign them. I imagine that it's known for a long time. And the key turning point for the transfer windows for me was January, was it 22, the season where we missed out by a goal, where we signed Reid, Kilgore, Keeler Dunn. We signed all those three in one window. And I think that just changed. They just fitted like a glove. We got rid of some players we didn't want. Every transfer window, we've been better, haven't we? That's the main thing, is that he slowly gets rid of one or two that he doesn't want, brings in one or two that he does want, and slowly the squad just moulds into what he wants. And the players that he brings in, I think, are 90% on their attitude and 10% ability for me. We've said it before, haven't we? You could find better right backs than Lucas Akins or strikers, whatever. There's better players than Jordan Bowery, but there aren't any players who will probably work harder. And that's what Clough wants, doesn't it? That's what he values. And I think that's what he brings in. His strategy is to bring in people who will fit, not just good players that are available. Andy Cork, Danny Johnson, that sort of ilk of player who are, on their day, good players, but they just don't fit. And he's signed. Everyone he's signed has fit into that team very nicely.
Well, I'm going to run through the transfers in just a minute because I've gone through a little bit of a Google search and had a little bit of a look. But patience is a big one, Alan. Obviously, we managed to get Stephen Quinn in the very first window, initially on loan to the end of the season. But from day one, we were linked with Lucas Akins, but it took another year for us to get him. He didn't arrive until January 2022. So it just shows, patience and perseverance is key with Clough. Case in point, we mentioned it there. Callum Johnson and Davis Keeler-Dunn were two that we'd identified in the summer of the season that they signed, but we didn't get until January because they wanted to go to another level. Lee Gregory, last season, we could have got in January, but we waited for him to be a free agent. There's a lot of patience and a lot of long-term planning with Nigel Clough, which you don't get with other managers, and you certainly wouldn't have got with other managers at the helm of Mansfield, because it had to be there and then, because results had to be there and then. It's a different game now, and I think Nigel Clough has not only changed our minds in that as well, but also, I'm going to use the phrase, I think he's taught John and Karen as well the virtue of patience and time. I
think you get ready with your bell, Craig, because it's just galvanised.
Well, where is it? Hang on. Yeah, go on, yeah.
It's just galvanised everybody, hasn't it? The players, the people around him. And obviously, it must take obviously Simon, Gary Crosby, and whoever else, Andy Garner, and whoever else is in his little team, them for I don't know how long. And he obviously trusts them implicitly, like Nick said. He's got to trust them because he knows they will do the right job. They will go and scout the players, and it doesn't matter how long he has to wait for them. If they're not available at that time, he's willing to wait. And he doesn't really make a stopgap either. He will put players in other positions until one comes along that is to fit that position. Like Will Evans, he came along. Okay, it paid quite a bit of money for him, but it's proved worthwhile, hasn't he? And it's like you said about Lee Gregory, waited for Lee Gregory. And he gets people in as and when needed. And he must nurture them because it's a fantastic setup, isn't it? Everybody is singing off. Everybody that you talk to, when they do an interview, they can't say enough about Nigel. There's no superstars. We're all fighting for the same thing. And it's just good to hear. It's typical Mansfield Town, that it is.
Yeah, it certainly is. And, the other key bit in there, Clive, as well, is the checkbook and the purse strings with Clough are very, very tight. I'm just looking through a few of the transfers, and whilst there's no figures on their heads, and because it's all undisclosed fees nowadays, terms of people that we've paid a fee for, and I exclude George Lapsley from this because he was already on loan with us at the time, but we did pay a fee for him when he joined permanently in Clough's first January. But Clough's second transfer window, the start of his first full season in charge, the only person we paid money for was Ollie Hawkins. His third one, it was free transfers and loan deals. The third one, we paid compensation for Anthony Hartigan. That was it. Paid a little bit of a fee for Callum Johnson, for Alfred Kilgore, and for Davies Keeler-Dunn. Everybody else was on a free, and we also shipped players out for a fee as well. And then again, you know, at the start of last season, paid money for Will Swan and for Christy Pym, and Tom Nichols in January. But other than that, and other than Will Evans in this window, we haven't really dipped into the checkbook. But when we've got rid of players, we've not got rid of them for free. The only time we've made a mistake on that is Danny Johnson.
Yeah, that was a mistake by the directors, I think. But ultimately, you put it behind you, don't you? You learn from it and move on. I think the reality is, though, when you let players go, it's not just about getting a fee for them. It's just taking their payroll out, because a lot of the players, as we've already said, were on decent packages, and they weren't deemed to be the right sort of player for Clough to want to keep. So you move them on to allow you to do some business to the other side. But when you let someone like Cook go, there's an argument for not letting him go, but then you know what sort of salary, well, you can guess what sort of salary he was commanding, and that comes straight off the costs. I don't pretend to know what everybody's being paid. We're only left to guess on these things, but we know John Joe O'Toole, when he was with us, we had to persuade him to sign, and that was only done by giving him a contract and a decent salary. So for him moving off the payroll was good business in that respect. So I just think you're right. I mean, he works for someone else's money, but he treats it as if it was his own. That seems to be the impression he gives anyway.
And then on the pitch, you know, with those transfers coming in, Alan, we do turn that into something good as well. You look at his first full season, the Wembley season. It's a bit of a poor start. 2 wins from the opening 14 games, which did include 5 draws. But after that, you know, what we do well and what he's done well historically through his tenure is put together a big sequence of results, making us hard to beat and making teams really, really become frustrated with coming and playing a Mansfield side. And I think that takes a lot of hard work to do. I'm going to try and run and get a drink. So if I'm not back by the time Alan's finished speaking, one of you two speak.
Well, it's been proved by some of the other players, hasn't it? Such as your Will Evans. He always says, you know, whenever I've come to Mansfield, it's really hard work. It's against a good team, a hard-working team, and it's a nasty place to come. And I've heard quite a few people say that. And that's
the Birmingham player said that, Al, as well.
Yeah.
The Birmingham player that they interviewed, he said that.
That's just how it is. That's how it gets the players to play. And, you know, if everybody's singing off the same hymn sheet, and like when you're 12, 13, 14, you sat on the bench, you're itching to come on. And so you're wanting to make a good impact so you can keep your place if possible. But it's like Macca said in his interview, I think it was 2 weeks ago, you know, nobody's crying, nobody's there sulking in the corner in the changing room. You know, if you're not on the team sheet, you're just geeing everybody else up that's on the pitch. And, you know, you're waiting for your chance. And when you get your chance, you've got to be able to take it and take it with aplomb. Otherwise, you know, you'll be on bench again next week.
I think another good example of that, though, is, and I know he gets a bit of stick, but Boateng could have very easily left during the promotion season. And he said, no, I want to stay and I want to fight. And that doesn't happen. We don't have that Mansfield, do we? Most players are desperate to escape. But
I think that used to be the case. That used to be the case, Nick, didn't it? I mean, that's the whole point about it. Yeah.
We used to let players go on their terms. And Clough in 4 years, other than maybe Ollie Clark, but obviously, you know, he went with his blessing. We haven't let anyone go who we didn't want to let go. And that in my lifetime has never... All of our best players have gone on a free. You know, the odd one we get money for, but you look at the team of Hassel and Williamson and Disley and Lawrence, they all left on their own terms. We've had other good players leave on their own terms, whereas under Clough, players don't want to leave, do they? You know, and look at, you know, the likes of Boateng who have said, no, I want to stay and I want to fight to get in this team. And that's probably a testament to Clough more than anything. But it just shows the level of attitude of players that we've got.
Keep your comments coming in. Have your say on your team. We're talking all things Nigel Clough on the anniversary of him becoming Mansfield manager. We were talking transfer business as well, and Ben has been in touch and says DKD has got to be one of the best bits of business in the division in terms of making money. We don't know what was made, but we know it was massive versus what we paid for him from Burton. And again, that's a prime example of how Nigel Clough operates as well. Bill says Nigel has brought the club to a level of respect in the EFL through hard work, discipline, and his experience. Mick says, I'm sick of commentators calling Akins Atkins. Chrissy Pym was also in goal for us at Curzon Ashton on Sunday, and not Christy Pym. But and Dave says we're proud of some of the unbeaten records as well. Well, let's have a little look at his record as well, Clive, because the Curzon Ashton result remarkably was Nigel Clough's 100th win in all competitions in his 4 years as Mansfield boss. In that time, he's taken charge of 185 league games, 87 wins, 52 draws, and only 46 defeats. He has really turned this Mansfield side into a side that are hard to beat and difficult to beat. And when eventually we do have to be sat in the situation talking about him moving on, what we've done is created and cultivated a really good squad for any manager to come in and mold into a way. And you'd have to be some poor manager to turn the side and the mentality that Clough has created back the other way in the other direction, wouldn't you?
You'd have to be another Coughlin, wouldn't you? That's the thing. I mean, the reality is what's been achieved under the time that Clough's been in charge, and it's not all down to him, but he's been a catalyst, is the club now has credibility, it has respect around the Football League in a way that perhaps it didn't have as much because of where we were and how long it take us to get back, and well, we're blundering around with managers that couldn't finish the task. And I think somebody said earlier, it might have been you, Craig, that he's taught the owners a thing or two, and that's quite important because ultimately they're the decision takers at the club. And some of the decisions in the earlier stages weren't good ones. I think now they have the confidence in the operational structure to just stand back and let it happen and then respond when they're required to, normally to approve a payment or an investment. But we have the respect that wasn't necessarily there before. I think that's my biggest point in the credit column for Clough and his team, is that under their management, the club itself, not just the team, the club itself has gained a degree of respect in the environment we work.
One thing we do have to have a little think about going forward is potentially what happens next. Now, Nick, you were listening to his interview earlier on today, and we were having a little chat about it before we came on air tonight. And you know, a few weeks ago, we were thinking we might not have long left under Nigel Clough, but certainly this season he's had a bit of a fresh air, because at the end of last season he was saying, and he mentioned it again in his interview, his wife wants him to retire. He was thinking about it last season. He got the 1 year extension for it via promotion last year. His contract's up at the end of this season, but when he was asked, you know, what's in store for the next 4 years, he didn't do what Nigel Clough would usually do, which is a complete shutdown and go, no, we've only got X amount of time left. The door was very much left open for what could happen in the future.
I think there was a Nigel Clough and Andy Garner sized hole left in the door. I think definitely. When he did the fans forum last year, oh my God! When he did the fans forum last year, I think some of us barely wondered whether he'd just about make it to this year, because he was quite, not negative's not the right word, but he wasn't very upbeat about staying here for a number of years, was he? It was more like, look, I'll get you up and I might look after you when you're up and that'll be me done. And then he's almost transformed into like a younger version of himself this year. I think it's probably the pressure lifting, I imagine. It's got to be a massive weight achieving the goal that you actually came here to do. And when, like you say, when Steve-O said 4 years, straight away Nigel would normally have said, no, not a chance. Hang on, rein yourself in, Steve-O. You know, and he didn't. He didn't dismiss it. He kind of said, oh, look where the future takes me, and we're enjoying it here, and as you look towards the end of your career. But then he weirdly dropped in, rather than say when we've retired or when we've finished, he actually said when we've moved on somewhere else. So, like,
No.
surely he's not got more. Surely he's not got more clubs left in him, has he? You know, he's done the tour of the East Midlands.
Albion.
Third spell.
Burton Albion. Well, they've got different owners now. Maybe they won't go back. But he's for him to suggest that he's got another club after Mansfield suggests that he might hopefully have a lot longer here. I mean, you know, if he has another 3 or 4 years here, God knows what we can achieve. But it will be a very, very sad day the day he does decide to leave. But I think the main thing is I don't think anyone will decide his future other than the man himself.
Yeah.
Then no one's going to sack him. You know, he's not. No fans are going to turn on him. It won't happen. It'll be him deciding that I've had enough, or Mrs. Clough deciding. But if we can keep Andy Garner. Somebody else can come and look after us. Uncle Stephen.
My God. I mean,
Uncle Stephen can look after us.
Not beyond the realms of a possibility, is it? But we'll talk about that in the future. That's definitely one for a rainy day. All that's left, though, to talk about, Alan, in terms of Clough, before we delve into the random game generator and podcast predictions, is to have a little bit of a look at what Clough's initial objectives were when he came in. Sort the playing squad out, sort the budget out and keep us safe, rebuild the squad, get us promoted. He's done all 3 of those in 4 years. And now, like we've been saying, it is a bit of a free hit. And I would certainly, if this was a game of argumental, and the topic was Nigel Clough is the greatest ever Mansfield Town manager, I don't think I could be persuaded otherwise that there's anyone better. All of them have done a superb job. You know, Paul Cox will always be up there for getting us out of the conference and getting us back in the Football League. You know, there's so many others in our history as well, Ian Graves and loads more from out the realms of time. But in terms of completely turning the club from being the Titanic in waiting to the best cruise liner on the ocean, sturdy and stable with an endless ocean ahead, I don't think you can argue that there's anybody better, surely.
I think everybody will have their own opinions because, I mean, there's a lot of people that's a lot older than myself who can remember the people like Dave Smith, who did an awful lot for Mansfield Town Football Club. But I tend to agree, you know, while Clough has had his tenure here at Mansfield Town, everything's gone from strength to strength. Everything that he wanted to put into the club has been done. It, like you said, all the other 3 things you mentioned, massive ticks each way. And who knows what Nigel will only know himself what's next. You know, it's going to be interesting for us Stags fans, isn't it, to see how he copes with League One and see what happens if we do go on a bit of a poor run, or if he just keeps on this steady incline, as we hope it will, you know, eventually get to the Championship where John and Karen wanted to be. You know, he said 10 years, but obviously it's going to take a lot longer because of what's happened in the past. But yeah, I just, you know, it'd be interesting for me to find out what Nigel wants to do and how far Nigel wants to take, you know, Mansfield Town.
Well, as always, there is an open invitation to come on the podcast and talk all things Mansfield Town. I could talk to that man all day as well. Earlier on, though, gents, I did ask you to start racking your brains, and some people in the comments as well, for the thing that Nigel Clough has done which impresses you the most, excluding promotion. Clive, I'm going to come to you first.
I think he doesn't hide his feelings. And I think I can pick on 2 examples of where his levels of frustration were so visible and tangible to the rest of us. His reaction to the 0-2 defeat at Northampton early days, when we had a shocking performance. He wasn't frightened to say so and to pick fault with his own players. And my memory of the interview after Wembley, it was visibly crestfallen. He was emotionally damaged by the whole experience. Understandably disappointed because he worked so hard to get into a position where we had to win 1 game to get promoted, and we just didn't turn up. And he's going to take some of the responsibility for that. And you could see it in his body language. It was hurting him. So I think he's a human being ultimately, and I think sometimes we see him as a human being, not just a professional sports manager.
Nick, what about you? You're muted.
muted myself just in case I end up coughing. Originally, I was going to say his interviews, but Clive's kind of touched on that because I was going to talk about the way that he's just very open and honest and often describes the game exactly how one of us four would. You know, there's no making stuff up or, oh, well, they gave 100%. If they didn't, he'll tell you. But what I'm actually going to go for is, I think for the first time, he's built a squad of players who appreciate the club and are reflective of what the values of the fans are. It's very rare he's managed to cultivate an atmosphere where they always go to the away fans now. They always come up to the home fans and clap. The families are involved with the club and they're all appreciative of what happens. All the interviews, everyone's on the same message. So I think for me, it's delivering a squad of players where I'm proud as a Mansfield fan to, no matter what the result, I don't care what the result is sometimes, it's that the players that are out there have given it their all for the badge, and that's what they're interested in. They're not here for any other reason other than to better the club and themselves, obviously. And they're all going the same direction. I think he's single-handedly cultivated that with his staff. So I think that's for me.
Alan?
Short and sweet, his man management skills are second to none. If he needs to put his arm around somebody or let him have a day, 2 off, a week off, personal reasons, whatever. If somebody needs a quick kick up the jacksie, he'll do that as well. He's not averse to doing any of that. And I think as a man, his man management style, it's just second to none. It's unbelievable. He's a really good, he's really good at that.
Yeah, absolutely. A really lovely man. He's really cultivated the stance in our club. And I think for me, it's the Nigel Clough isms. It's the fact that we no longer look at 3 or 4 games in the future. We're only looking at, the game that's just gone, Curzon Ashton. There's no point talking about it now because it's been and gone. If we'd have lost that game, we'd have been frustrated, but there's no point dwelling on it because we can't change it. Also, there's no point talking about 3 or 4 games in the future because we haven't got there yet. It's the focus is on what we can change and what we can deliver. And that has, I think, installed a weird sort of sadistic sense of calm and calculation amongst the fan base, which is really, really, nice and refreshing to see. But I think it's also the whole Nigel Cloughisms where every now and again we'll do something which any other manager does. You think, what on earth are you doing? But Nigel Clough does it and it just works. Case in point, Ollie Hawkins at centre-back for an entire season. John Joe O'Toole, who was previously a number 10 and for the likes of Northampton playing at centre-back. Them going to Northampton in the second leg of the playoff semi-final and playing O'Toole and Kieran Wallace as 2 defensive midfielders out of nowhere and nullifying them from the game. Jordan Bowery, who would have thought 4 years ago he'd have still been A at the club and then be a recognised defender. And then the likes of bringing Alfie Kilgore off the bench to a raucous reception and, putting him up front rather than chucking him in the back foot. There's loads of things which Nigel Clough does, which any other managers does, which you just think, what are you doing? There's always a reason behind it. It's always explained. There's always an honesty there. And honestly, it's the day where we have to sit here and do the next managerial change special is a day that I do not want to come for many years. I want to enjoy this trajectory and try and get up another division, not this season, maybe not even next season, perhaps the season after, and see where the club can go with the infrastructure that's been built. Let's not forget when Nigel Clough came into this football club, we were second from bottom, third from bottom, whatever. We were really struggling in the league. We'd not got a win. We go on, we show patience. It's been rough, it's been smooth, it's been good, it's been bad, but ultimately there's always been this forward trajectory. And now you look at Mansfield Town Football Club and you walk around the town centre and you see young kids wearing Mansfield shirts, not Liverpool shirts, not Forest shirts, not Man United shirts. They're wearing Mansfield shirts and there's a demand for tickets week in, week out. And we've really cultivated this great atmosphere. Keep your comments coming in and have your say on your team. We'll do podcast predictions later. We're going to have a bit of fun in just a second. Bill says Nigel has had the fantastic backing of the Radfords. No other manager worthy of being in the same class had that, i.e. Dave Smith, Ian Greaves, etc. They did a fantastic job with less resource. Mick says, I like Tommy Eggleston beating a West Ham side with England internationals. And Ben says, 4 more years, Nigel Cloughy, 4 more years. Same tune as the Stephen Quinn song. Well, I have to tell you, Ben, if that was ever to be sung at One Call Stadium and he heard Nigel Cloughy, there'd be a resignation on the Redford's desk immediately. So Nigel Clough to say, do not call me Cloughy. Absolutely love it. Right, let's fire up a certain generator for you. Unfortunately, the graphic side of it isn't working today, but the button side is. So let's find out what we're going to be playing.
Content loading. Selecting game. Game selected. Players stand by. Know your Clough stuff.
A part of Clive dies every time you play that jingle.
I love it. It's great. I love watching his face. The life so slowly gets sucked out of his face at that point.
He just pressed his own doorbell just so he could get up and go.
Can I, before we start this load of nonsense, can I just make another point about the club?
Go on.
I've personally been a critic of the club in terms of the way it interfaces with the fans on a customer basis over the years. And I think there's still a lot of work they need to do on that score. But I'm learning just now that they are appointed or have appointed an events manager. And the plan is to put more events on in the 1861 and the Marquee to give the opportunity for more interaction with the fans, between the club and fans. That can only be a good thing in my book, and long overdue.
Absolutely.
There's also it's probably worth mentioning as well, something that Craig sort of pointed the club in my direction, is that they're looking sorting a memory club for old players again, which is well overdue. A support network of ex-players, of which I'm currently corralling as many people as I can. I had Chris Greenacre this morning say he wants to get involved. So the club are, like Clive says, moving in the right direction, I think, 100%.
Certainly so. And if the club and the events manager, whoever that may be, want to get in touch, we're more than happy to help out and do something. Ex-player interviews, whatever it may be, we're here to help. Why? Because Mansfield matters, as do the games. And let's find out what we're going to be playing. We know that we're going to be playing Know Your Clough stuff. It is a quiz all about Nigel Clough and his time at the club. You will need a pen and paper. Now, Alan earlier in the chat did say, I'll find an old news. I must say, Alan, that if you have got an old team sheet and it is within the Nigel Clough tenure, you are not allowed to use it, as it may well be of an advantage.
There is no team sheet here.
Excellent. Right, we've all got a pen and paper. Let's get started. You can play along with this at home. There are 14 questions, numerous points to be had. I'm going to get through them as quickly as I can, and then we'll do podcast predictions. So here we go. Question 1. These are all about Nigel Clough and his tenure at Stags. Question 1. Despite being appointed on November the 6th, Clough's first game in the dugout didn't come until the 10th of November, an EFL Trophy group game against who? Bonus points if you can name the full-time scoreline and the goal scorers for 1 point each. So despite being appointed on November the 6th, Clough's first game in the dugout didn't come until the 10th of November, an EFL Trophy group game against who? Bonus points if you can name the full-time scoreline and the goal scorers for 1 point each.
How many extra points do we get for the goal scorers, Craig?
1 point each.
How many in total?
1 point each. Question 2. Days later, Clough took charge of his first league fixture, a 2-1 win at Forest Green Rovers. But of the starting 11 that day, how many players have remained at the club to date? And can you name them? 1 point per correct answer and double points if you get them all. So days later, Clough took charge of his first league fixture, 2-1 win at Forest Green. But of the starting 11 that day, how many players have remained at the club and can you name them all? 1 point per correct answer and double points if you get them all. Question 3. During Clough's tenure, as of today, how many league places have the Stags climbed? During Clough's tenure, as of today, how many league places have the Stags climbed? Question 4. Nigel Clough has often been partial to signing a free agent outside of the window, but can you name the defender he signed during his first season in charge, who'd make only 2 appearances from the bench? Bonus points for naming the 2 games that he played in. And here's a clue. He was most known for a long spell at Oxford United and Sheffield United. Nigel Clough has often been partial to signing a free agent outside of the window, but can you name the defender he signed during his first season who'd only make 2 appearances from the bench? Bonus points for naming the 2 games he played in. And he was most known for a long spell at Oxford and Sheffield United. Question 5. For Nigel Clough's first league game in front of a home crowd, Bristol Rovers in August 2021, what was the attendance, full-time score and goal scorers? 1 point each, double points if you get them all.
Do you want the names and addresses of all the people who attended?
Inside leg measurement, please.
If I lived closer to where you live, Craig, I'd come round and kill you.
Oh, just you wait.
I can't even tell you that information from Saturday just gone.
Jesus keepers, we're already on question 6. So let's mix it up. You're all going to make a bid between 1 and 7 in a minute to name all of the goalkeepers that Clough has used in competitive fixtures. Like I said, there are 7 in total. If yours is the highest bid, you must name them all successfully. You get them wrong, and all 7 points will be awarded to everyone else. So, Nick, I need a number between 1 and 7 of the goalkeepers you think you can name.
5.
Clive?
1.
Alan?
I'll say 5.
Okay, Nick, would you like to go higher than 5, or would you want to make Alan try and go higher than 5?
I would happily make Alan go higher than 5. I don't think I've got 6.
Nah, I don't think I have.
Okay, well, one of you is going to have to go. So, Clive, as soon as you've went for 1, you get to nominate who goes. You could get yourself some points here. Who's playing, Nick or Alan?
Alan.
Okay, Alan.
Yes, Clive.
There are 7
Thanks a lot.
goalkeepers. 7 goalkeepers to name who've played in competitive fixtures. You need to name 6. No, you need to name 5. Sorry, you bid for 5 and we couldn't decide. You need to name 5. Who are they?
I've got Bishop, Pym, Flinders, Stack. I'm stuck at the moment.
You need to name 1 more.
I know.
I think I've got 1 more than that. They were 4 I had. I think I've got 1 more.
Alan, I'm going to give you 20 seconds to have a little think. Pressure's on. If I give you 30 seconds, those 30 seconds to think start now.
Oh, I don't want 30 seconds. If he
Bobby,
doesn't know,
think
he
of Bobby
doesn't
Mims,
know.
Alan. Think of Bobby Mims, Jason Piercy, Darren Ward, Nicky
Cheers.
Weaver,
Conrad Logan. Don't forget him.
Conrad Logan. Yeah.
15 seconds. Just got to name a goalkeeper, Alan, to get the points.
I know, but I can't think of one. There's not one coming. I did
5.
want to get them for.
Carl Muggleton, Jason White, Kevin Pressman.
No,
Yeah,
your time's up,
that's
Alan. Your time's up, Alan. So, Clive and Nick, you can write on your piece of paper plus 7 points.
I
And Alan,
remember
you get
that.
Was one of them George Shelby, who played a Papa John's, whatever it's called?
It was. The correct answers
Yes.
were Aidan Stone, Marek Steck, Jamie
Stone.
Jamie
That's what I found.
Partington. Jamie Partington played the last game of the season at Port Vale. Nathan Bishop, George Shelby, Christy Pym, and Scott Flinders. Right, back to the questions. Question 7. Being hard to beat has become a staple of Clough's tenure, but there's been lows too. At the start of the playoff final season, Clough's side picked up only 2 wins from their opening 14 league games. Bristol Rovers and which other team? Being hard to beat has become a staple of Clough's tenure, but there's been lows too. At the start of the playoff final season, Clough's side only picked up 2 wins from their first 14 league games. Bristol Rovers and which other team? Question 8. On the flip side, that same season, the Stags would then go on to achieve just 1 loss in 18 games, the loss being against Sutton United. That run also included 14 wins in the league. Your task in the next 2 minutes is to name as many as possible and the scoreline. You get 1 point each, and you get double if you get them all right. And you have 2.5 minutes starting now.
And the scorelines.
Yep.
He's
Forget
having a giraffe.
I think I'll go and get custard cream.
That was one of the games, wasn't it?
Need one.
Try and get yourself as many points as you can. Clive's gone.
I've already lost 7. Thanks to Clive.
Oh, I do like to
2 minutes remaining. The question. On the flip side, the same season, the Stags would then go on to achieve just 1 loss in 18 games, a loss being against Sutton. That run included 14 wins in the league. Can you name the teams the Stags beat and the score lines? 1 point each. Double if you get them right. Give you another minute.
I don't think it'll matter how long you give me.
Just get as many as you can. $20 seconds.
Grimsby.
All right, I'll put you out your misery. Question 9. According to Google, how many players has Nigel Clough brought into the club during his 8 transfer windows so far, excluding George Lapsley, who was already at the club when Clough arrived, having his loan move turned permanent under the Stags boss? For clarity in this answer, where a player initially joins on loan and then later signs a permanent deal, that is classed as one deal. So in a nutshell, how many players has Clough signed?
You don't want the names and telephone numbers, Craig?
I would like the names, their inside leg measurements, and whether or not Andy Garner has gone.
Oh my gosh.
When he saw them naked for the first time.
And what about their favourite biscuit?
Always a bourbon. Questions. So that's question 9. According to Google, how many players has Nigel Clough brought into the club during his 8 transfer windows so far? Excluding George Lapsley, who was already at the club. And where a player joined on loan and then became permanent later on, that's classed as one deal. 4 questions left-ish. Yeah, something like that.
Oh, God.
5, I think.
We're going to go into extra time tonight. Question 10. After playoff heartbreak, the Stags would then take a step backwards, finishing 1 goal outside the playoffs on goal difference. Which team took the final playoff place, having conceded 1 less goal? And how many goals did the Stags concede, meaning they'd miss out? 1 point each. So after the playoff heartbreak, the following season, the Stags finished 1 goal outside the playoffs on goal difference. Which team took the final playoff place, having conceded 1 less goal? And how many goals did the Stags concede, meaning they'd miss out? Question 11 is Alan's favourite question. In the same season, the Stags actually made it out of the group stage of the EFL Trophy. A group stage that included a penalty shootout win against Derby County. Name the successful penalty takers, 1 point each. Double if you get them all. So in that same season, the Stags actually made it out of the group stage of the EFL Trophy. A group stage that included the penalty shootout win against Derby County. Name the successful penalty takers. 1 point each. Double if you get them all. Question 12. Promotion was finally delivered in a memorable season that saw the Stags finish 3rd in League 2 last term, with Clough's men getting off to a flying start. 19 games unbeaten at all competitions, excluding extra time. How many minutes of football is that?
Repeat that.
So last season, the Stags got off to a flying start, going 19 games unbeaten in all competitions, excluding extra time. How many minutes of football is that? Penultimate question. That same season included a memorable 9-2 win over Harrogate Town. Name the starting lineup from that game, 1 point each, and it's double if you get them all right.
Oh, for goodness sake.
What's this, the starting 11 at Harrogate?
Yeah, the 9-2 win over Harrogate. Starting 11, please.
And the names of all their brothers and sisters.
No, they're
what are
dogs.
the pets' names, please.
Yeah, it's dogs. And just confirm the date of their latest vaccination as well, please.
I'd like their CV history and GCSE results, please, of the midfield.
Jay, bring some Prozac, will you?
And the final question, the 4-0 winner.
Hell, give me 2 minutes. Bloody hell.
Oh, I'll give you another 30 seconds.
It not make any difference. Come back, Craig's bucket.
Next week.
Thank God for that.
The last question, the 4-0 win at Curzon Ashton was Clough's 100th win in all competitions. In terms of league games managed, though, what is Clough's overall league record? If you've been listening, I gave you the answer to this earlier in the show. So the final question, the 4-0 victory at Curzon Ashton was Clough's 100th win in all competitions. In terms of league games managed, though, what is Clough's overall record? Right. Let's get marking some of the answers then, shall we?
Oh, Christ.
Here we go. Mark your own and we'll come to the scores at the end. Despite being appointed on November the 6th, Clough's first game in the dugout didn't come until the 10th of November. An EFL Trophy game against who? The correct answer was Scunthorpe United. The scoreline was 1-2-1 and the goal scorers were Ryan Sweeney and Jamie Reid.
So if you've got Scunthorpe 2-1, how many points is that?
1 point for Scunthorpe United, 1 point for 2-1, 1 point for Ryan Sweeney, 1 point for Jamie Reid.
Woohoo!
Whoa.
Question 2 days later, Clough took charge of his first league fixture, 2-1 win at Forest Green. But of that starting 11, how many have remained at the club to this day, and can you name them? 1 point each and double points if you get them correct. The correct answer is 3 players remain.
Oh,
Barry, Maris, and Macca.
Correct. If you get all 3, that's 6 points. Well done.
Oh, get ready.
I've nearly got my 7 back.
Well, let's see if you can get another point, Alan. During Clough's tenure as of today, how many league places have the Stags climbed?
42.
Correct. Question 4. Nigel Clough has often been partial to signing a free agent outside the window. Can you name the defender who he signed during his first season who made 2 appearances from the bench?
Kieran Freeman?
The answer was Jake Wright.
Who?
Yeah, making it up.
Jake Wright, ex-Oxford
Jake
and
Wrong.
Sheffield United. And the games for bonus points were Barrow away and Grimsby at home. I don't
Never heard
think
of him.
any of you got that anyway, so it doesn't matter.
Stupid question.
Won't be saying that if you win. But Nigel Clough's first... Question 5. Shut up. Question 5. Nigel Clough's first league game in front of a home crowd, Bristol Rovers, August 2021. What was the attendance, full-time score and goal scorers? 1 point each, double points if you get them all right. The correct answers were 1 point for 6,346, 1 point for 1-2-1, 1 point for Hawkins, 1 point for Johnson. So if you got 6,346, 1-2-1, Hawkins and Johnson, that's 8 points.
If you got 6,000 whatever and 46,
46. Who's going to carry that?
that's only worth 1 point. How is that only worth 1 point? If you got that right, you deserve to win the thing and turn the podcast off.
No, next. We did Jeepers Keepers, so let's move on to question 7. Being hard to beat has become a staple of Clough's tenure, but there's been lows too. At the start of the league, the playoff final league season, Clough's side picked up 2 wins from their opening 14 games. Bristol Rovers and which other team? The correct answer was Newport County. Question 8, on the flip side, this was the 14 wins in the league. No one will have got them all, but I'll run through them. So if you got any of the following, you get 1 point for naming Tranmere Rovers, 1 point for 2-0 for saying 2-0. Stevenage 2-1, Scunthorpe 3-1.
Yeah, I got Scunthorpe.
Crawley 2-1.
Yeah.
Carlisle 1-0. Salford 2-1.
Yeah.
No.
Hartlepool 3-2. Swindon 3-2. Walsall 2-0. Barrow 3-1. Leyton Orient 2-0. Colchester 2-1. Bradford 2-0 and Exeter 2-1.
Got that one.
Question 9. Players.
So there's 28 points at stake there.
Whatever double 14 is.
28.
So yeah, 28.
I've got 4 then.
Well done.
I got 4.
Yeah, we'll come to that later. Let's push on. Question 9. How many players has he signed?
29.
Correct answer was 40.
Oh,
Jesus Christ.
God.
I got
Right.
43. Does that count?
No.
If
4,136 only got you 1 point, then you being 3 off the right answer gets you
But
sod all.
could I not include those I make up, like you made up that player who had 2 appearances?
Jake Wright, I think you'll
Yeah.
find he did have 2 appearances, and Nick one day will get his shirt. Question 10.
Yes.
After the playoff heartbreak, the Stags would then take a step backwards, finishing 1 goal outside the playoffs. Who took the final playoff space? Salford.
Salford.
Yeah.
How many goals did the Stags concede that season? 55.
63.
Oh! I put 54. Well, I don't believe that.
In the
Nothing.
same
You get
season,
Was it
question
55?
55.
Oh, no.
In the same season, question 11, the Stags made it out of the group stage in the EFL Trophy. Penalty shootout win against Derby. Name all the successful penalty takers. 1 point each. Double if you get them all right. 1 point for Swan. 1 point for Lapsley. 1 point for
Yes.
Hewitt. 1 point for Gale. 1 point for Clark. And 1 point for Hawkins.
3.
2.
I
If
got
you got
3.
all 6, you can double it. Question 12. Promotion was finally delivered in a memorable season that saw the Stags finish 3rd in League 2, with Clough's men getting off to a flying start. 19 games unbeaten in all competitions. How many minutes of football is that, excluding extra time? 1,710!
Yes!
Yay! I got that right.
Question 13. That season included a memorable 9-2 winner over Harrogate. Name the starting lineup from the game. 1 point each. Double if you get them all right. The starting lineup was him, Bowery, Flint, Brunt, Cargill, Reed,
Oh, I forgot
Boateng,
about him.
Quinn, DKD, Akins, and Nichols.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7.
And the final question. The 4-0 win at Curzon Ashton was Clough's 100th in all competitions. In terms of league games managed, though, what is Clough's overall record? Played 185, won 87, drawn 52, and lost 46. 1 point each.
Oh, I got 46. 1 point.
Right, very quickly tot up your scores. And we'll see who wins. Let me know when you've got your scores.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it.
Alan, you got -7 for a question, so let's start with you.
So I've whatever score I've got, then I say -7 off that.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Sorry, yes.
17 then.
So Alan got 17. Clive.
Thank you for the 7, Alan. I've got
Yeah.
8. 31.
And Nick. I can't see. 33.
Oh, quality.
So there, Nick is your winner.
Well
Well done to Nick. You got it right. Well done, and you know the most Clough stuff. Well done to you. Right, let's do this.
Stuffed.
Let's do this very quickly, shall we? So, can you be the master or an embarrassing disaster? In this guessing game, there's a simple aim. It's outguess the rest and be the best. Win, lose or draw. Do you know the score? Who will be your hero to make sure you don't score 0? Yes, it may be fiction, but this is Podcast Predictions. Right, we're very short on time, so let's crack straight on. Alan, Wrexham away, let's go.
Wrexham 2, Mansfield Town 2, Will Evans.
Clive, you're next.
Wrexham 1, Stags 2, Bim.
Nick.
Meeting myself again. 1-1. I'm going to go with Dave.
I am going to go for 2-2, and I am going to go for Reeds. As always, if you want to get involved with podcast predictions, you can do so via the link in the description. Reminder, you must do so no later than 1 hour and 1 minute before kickoff on Saturday lunchtime. Remember, 12:30 kickoff. So 11:29 is the cutoff for your podcast predictions guesses, and you can also get your guesses in for the remainder of the month as well. So a reminder that Alan has gone for a 2-2 draw and he's picked Will Evans as his fantasy captain. Clive is the only one that's gone for a win for us in a change of tactic from what he's usually gone for. 2-1 win for Pim and Pim as fantasy captain. Nick's gone for a 1-1 draw with Dave as his fantasy skipper. And I've gone for Lewis Reed as my fantasy captain and a 2-2 draw. We'll reveal who's won the week on our social media at the end of the game as well. And we'll also tell you all about it next week as well. And that is pretty much all we've got time for on this week's show. My thanks to all of you for getting involved. Please do feel free to get involved with podcast predictions as the Stags travel to Wrexham to try and continue their fantastic form and kickstart the next year of Nigel Clough's managerial tenure and make yet more quintessential progress. My thanks to Alan Wilson, to Nick of Mansfield Town Shirts fame, and to Clive Parkin for joining me on the show this evening. And my thanks to you for listening at home as well and for watching along on the live feed. Always great to have you with us. Join us again next week when we reflect on all things Wrexham and look ahead to future fixtures as well. This is the show for the fans, by the fans. Why? Because Mansfield always matters. Celebrating tonight 4 years of Nigel Clough in Mansfield Town's dugout. What a 4 years it's been. From reshaping the dressing room, cutting the wage budget, getting bums back on seats when we were allowed back in the ground, to delivering promotion and putting us on the precipice of a promise, that's hard to say at this time on a Wednesday night, for life in League One and whatever the future may bring. We'll be there to follow the journey all the way through, no matter what happens, because Mansfield always matters. Nigel, it's been a fantastic ride. Thank you for everything you've done from every